The rain-slicked streets of Seattle gleamed under the sodium glow of streetlights, a city that never quite slept, but always seemed to brood. I pulled my trench coat tighter, the damp wool scratching against my neck as I stepped out of the drizzle and into the towering glass fortress of Pacific Trust Bank. My boots echoed on the marble floor, each step a defiance against the weight of eyes already pinning me down. I wasn't here for myself. Not entirely. $200. That's all I needed to pull from my account to cover blankets and hot meals for the shelter down on Pike Street. The kind of place where people like Mrs. Callahan, with her trembling hands and too proud smile, could find a moment's warmth. But as I crossed the threshold, the air shifted, thick with the scent of polished wood and veiled judgment. I felt it before I saw her. Margot, my sister, the branch manager, her presence like a storm cloud dressed in tailored silk. She stood behind the counter, her winter white blazer pristine, her auburn hair coiled tight like she'd tamed every strand into submission. Her eyes locked onto mine, and that smile, God, that smile, curved like a blade. "Well, look who's here," she said, her voice carrying just enough to turn heads. "Evelyn Harper, slumming it at my bank." The words hit like a slap, and the lobby, all gleaming marble and hushed whispers, seemed to tighten around me. A man in a navy suit glanced up from his phone. A woman, adjusting her scarf, paused, her gaze crawling over my thrift store coat and faded jeans. $200, I said, keeping my voice steady, sliding my ID across the counter. Withdraw, checking account. My heart thumped, but I kept my chin up, refusing to let her see the sting. Margot leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping the counter, her smile widening into something predatory. "Oh, Eveline," she purred, loud enough for the line behind me to hear. "We don't serve street rats here. You know that, don't you?" The word landed like a grenade, and the room froze. A teller gasped softly. The suit's eyebrows shot up. I stood there, my fingers twitching at my sides, the weight of every stare pressing into me like a physical force. I could have shouted, could have called her out for the years of venom she'd spit my way. Every family dinner where she dismissed me as the quiet one, every holiday where she'd laughed off my dreams like they were childish scribbles. But I didn't. Silence was my weapon, honed over years of being the invisible sister. I nodded once, slow, deliberate, and turned on my heel. My boots made no sound as I walked out, the glass doors hissing shut behind me. The cold Seattle rain kissed my face, a small mercy against the burn in my chest. I caught my reflection in the bank's polished windows, head high, eyes steady, no tears. Not anymore. Back in my loft, the city's hum filtered through the cracked window, a low pulse of traffic and distant sirens. The place smelled of cedar and old books, my sanctuary of mismatched furniture and thrift store finds. I peeled off my coat, draping it over a chair, and let my fingers linger on the scarf I'd worn, a faded navy thing I'd bought at a Fremont market years ago, back when $10 felt like a rebellion. I sank onto the couch, the springs creaking under me, and pulled my laptop from its hiding spot beneath a cushion. It was an old Dell, edges worn smooth, but it held secrets no one in that bank could imagine. My fingers moved over the keys with practiced precision, typing a passphrase that hadn't changed in years, "Raven wings soar." The screen flickered, then steadied, revealing a portal few in the world had ever seen. A soft ping announced an encrypted message from R.A., my silent partner, the only one who knew the truth. "You're finally ready." I stared at the words, my pulse steady but heavy, like a drumbeat in a quiet room. I typed back, "It's time. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just purpose." I wasn't always this person. Once I was just Evelyn, the girl who sat in the corner at family gatherings, listening to Margot charm the room while our mother Lillian nodded approvingly, Our father, before he passed, had called me soft, said I'd never survive the cutthroat world of finance. Margot was worse. Aim lower, Evelyn, she'd sneered when I mentioned a tech internship at a startup. The world doesn't owe you a corner off it. They had laughed, all of them, at a Christmas party I wasn't even invited to, their voices carrying through the frosted windows as I stood outside, buttoning my coat in the snow. I'd whispered to myself then, one day they'll see. Tonight, I didn't need to whisper. I reached for my phone, scrolling past names I hadn't called in years, and dialed a number no one in my family knew I had. Hey, I said when the line connected, my voice calm as the rain outside. It's Evelyn, I need a favor. The voice on the other end didn't ask questions. That's how we worked, clean, no back and forth, just execution. I hung up and leaned back, the laptop's glow casting shadows across the room. The scarf lay folded on the table, no longer a shield, but a reminder of who I'd been and who I'd become. That night, as I sipped peppermint tea that went cold too fast, my mind drifted to the first danger I'd faced since building Cascade Ventures. It was 6 months ago, in a dim alley behind a Capitol Hill coffee shop. I'd been meeting a contact to discuss fund encryption when a man in a black hoodie stepped from the shadows, his hand twitching toward a concealed blade. "Hand over the drive," he'd growled, eyes glinting with desperation. It stayed calm, slipping the USB into my pocket and stepping back, my voice low but firm. "Walk away. You don't know what you're stepping into." He'd hesitated, maybe sensing the steel beneath my words, and then vanished into the night. I'd walked home, heart pounding, knowing someone out there was watching. The second danger came weeks later, a cyber attack on Cascade servers. My screen had lit up at 3 a.m. alerts screaming as lines of malicious code tried to claw through my firewall. I'd sat there in my pajamas, fingers flying across the keyboard, countering every move. Whoever they were good. Too good for a random hack. I'd traced the attack to a shadow server in Eastern Europe, but the trail went cold. Someone wanted my fund's secrets, and they weren't playing small. By morning, the rain had stopped, and Seattle woke to a gray dawn that felt heavier than usual. I dressed deliberately. Black slacks, a fitted blazer, nothing flashy but sharp enough to say I wasn't here to beg. I headed back to Pacific Trust, not through the main entrance, but a side door most customers never noticed. A security guard expecting me pressed a biometric panel, and the private elevator opened with a soft chime. My heart didn't race. It thumped with purpose, each beat a countdown to the moment I'd been building toward for years. The third danger had come just a week ago, a near miss that still left my palms clammy. I'd been driving home from a late meeting when a black SUV swerved into my lane on the I-5, forcing me toward the guardrail. The headlights blinded me, the engine's roar drowning out my own thoughts. I'd yanked the wheel, tires screeching, and pulled onto the shoulder just in time. The SUV sped off, its plates obscured, leaving me gripping the steering wheel, breath ragged. Someone knew I was moving pieces on the board, and they weren't happy. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the bank's archive floor, vaults, boardrooms, and names etched into stone walls like a financial hall of fame. I pushed through the oak doors of the boardroom where 7 suits waited, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. I set my folio down, the black leather stark against the polished table. "This isn't a courtesy call," I said, my voice cutting through the room's chill. "This is a legal alignment. As of last night, the 1962 Oregon Timber Trust merges into this bank's foundation. I'm the named beneficiary. Majority control." The silence was thick, broken only by Robert Templeton, the oldest board member, his voice soft but heavy. "You've had this planned for a while, haven't you?" I met his gaze. 14 months. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "We've been waiting for someone like you." The fourth danger had been subtler, but no less chilling. A month ago, I'd received an anonymous email, a single line, "We know who L. Raven is." No signature, no trace, just a threat that hung in my inbox like a guillotine. I'd spent nights reinforcing my encryption, changing passphrases, moving servers. Whoever was behind it hadn't struck again yet, but the message lingered, a reminder that my alias wasn't as invisible as I'd hoped. Margot burst into the room 15 minutes later, her heels too loud, her makeup flawless, but her eyes wild. She looked at me like I was a ghost she'd buried long ago. I slid a sealed envelope across the table. "From legal," I said. Her fingers hesitated, then tore it open. I watched the color drain from her face as she read, "Formal removal, ethics clause, retaliatory misconduct, all documented, all signed." She stammered. "This is a lie. You can't." I cut her off. "It's real. You've been working for me, Margot. All these years, laughing behind my back." The fifth danger hit just hours before this meeting. I'd found a bug, a literal one, a tiny listening device tucked under my loft's coffee table. I'd swept the place myself, heart pounding, wondering who'd been close enough to plant it. A rival, a family ally. I'd crushed it under my heel, but the violation lingered, a whisper that my sanctuary wasn't safe. Victor, Margot's husband, shifted in his seat, tugging at his collar. "You can't take everything, Evelyn. We're family." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Exactly. And that's why I didn't take everything, just the part you tried to erase." The board voted unanimously. No debate. As they filed out, I stayed behind, walking past the vaults to a glass panel where my grandfather's name was etched. Beside it, freshly carved, was mine. Back at my loft, the rain had started again, tapping the windows like a restless ghost. I changed into a sweater, lit a lamp, and noticed it. An envelope slid under my door, my mother's handwriting unmistakable. I didn't open it, not yet. The weight of her silence over the years felt heavier than any words she could offer now. I sank onto the couch, the laptop glowing beside me. Cascade Ventures dashboard loaded, the logo understated but powerful. I was still the controlling shareholder, my name tucked quietly in the ownership tab. A message from RA flashed. "They're circling, stay sharp." I exhaled, my fingers brushing the scarf on the table. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what they'd tried to steal. My name, my worth, my silence. Tomorrow, I'd walk into our family's estate, not as the girl they'd dismissed, but as a force they couldn't ignore. The rain picked up, rattling the windows, and I smiled. For the first time in years, the storm felt like it was on my side. The wind howled through the iron gates of the Harper family estate in Portland, a sprawling relic of old money nestled among ancient firs that loomed like silent judges. I stepped onto the stone path, my heels clicking with a rhythm that felt like a war drum in my chest. The air was sharp, laced with the scent of damp moss and wood smoke, and the house ahead glowed faintly, its windows spilling warm light that promised comfort but delivered only scrutiny. My navy blazer felt like armor, but the folder under my arm, thick with evidence, was my true weapon. Tonight, I wasn't Evelyn Harper, the overlooked sister. I was a reckoning, and the family inside had no idea what was coming. The foyer greeted me with its familiar grandeur, marble floors, a chandelier dripping crystal, and the faint hum of voices from the dining hall. Margot's laughter floated out, brittle and performative, as she entertained her usual crowd. Extended family, old friends, and a few slick investors chasing her coattails. I paused, letting the moment settle, my fingers brushing the edge of the folder. The letter from my mother, Lillian, still sat unopened in my loft, its weight lingering in my mind like a bruise. But this wasn't about her yet. This was about Margot, Victor, and the lies they'd built like a house of cards. I stepped into the dining hall, and the room stuttered. Forks paused mid-air. A cousin from Boise coughed into his napkin. Margot, at the head of the table, froze mid-sentence, her champagne flute glinting under the pendant light. Lillian, perched at the far end, her pearl necklace clasped too tight, met my eyes and didn't look away. Victor, always a beat behind, forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Evelyn," Margot said, her voice slicing through the silence, "this is unexpected." Her smile was a mask, but I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. I set the folder on the marble buffet, ignoring the canapes she'd ordered to impress her guests. "If I may," I said, my voice calm but carrying, "I'd like to make a small withdrawal of the truth." The words landed like a thunderclap, and the silence that followed was suffocating. Margot laughed, that high, brittle sound she used when she was losing control. "Evelyn, if this is some dramatic cry for attention—" "No," I cut her off, turning to the crowd. "This is documentation, not drama." I opened the folder, my movements deliberate, and began. First, the trust signed by our father, equal distribution between his daughters. I held up a copy, the ink stark against the page. Then, the forged amendment, dated 2 weeks before his stroke. Gasps rippled through the room. I displayed the notary stamp, its edges crisp and damning. Next, the Oregon vineyard, transferred to an offshore account under Margot's shell company. Whispers grew louder. A family friend passed me a laptop, and I plugged in a USB drive, the screen behind me flickering to life. With quiet precision, I scrolled through transaction logs, emails, timelines. "The STEM endowment for young women," I said, pulling up a PDF, "repurposed by Margot for a personal real estate venture." The room shifted, chairs creaking as guests leaned forward or away. "Authorized under our mother's signature," I added, dated the day she was in surgery in Zurich. Heads turned. Margot's lip twitched. "She gave me permission?" she snapped. "You don't know everything, Evelyn." "She couldn't have," I said, meeting her stare. "The hospital records confirm it." The screen showed the proof, and the room's energy cracked like glass. Victor stood, his voice low but shaking. "Margot, what have you done?" Her napkin hit the table, her champagne flute trembling in her hand. "This is what she does," she hissed, her face reddening. "She digs until there's nothing left to bury." She's always been jealous. But the room wasn't hers anymore. An uncle muttered, disgraceful, and headed for the door. A couple from our father's side left silently, their footsteps echoing. Lillian sat still, her eyes on her plate, listening to something older than the voices around her. I closed the folder, my voice soft but unyielding. "This house has 2 doors. Today I walk out the one you didn't build." I left the folder on the table. Margot's throne, and turned away, the air behind me heavy with stunned silence. Outside, the Portland night was crisp, the stars hidden by clouds that promised more rain. I was halfway to my car when Margot's voice sliced through the dark. "You're not selling it, are you?" I didn't turn, but her words told me everything. They felt the shift. For once, I wasn't reacting, I was leading. The silence I left behind was louder than any argument. The first new danger came the next morning, as I drove to Pacific Trust's archive floor for the trust merger. My phone buzzed with an unknown number, and a distorted voice hissed, "Drop the trust, or you'll regret it." The line went dead before I could respond, my knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. I scanned the rearview mirror, half expecting a tail. but the Seattle traffic was its usual chaos. Someone was desperate. I wasn't sure if it was family or a shadow from Cascade Ventures' past. At the bank, the private elevator felt like a coffin, its brass walls reflecting my steady gaze. The archive floor was a labyrinth of vaults and stone, the air heavy with the weight of legacy. The board waited in the oak-paneled room, their faces a mix of respect and caution. The 1962 Oregon Timber Trust merges into the bank's foundation, I said, setting the folio down. I hold majority control. Robert Templeton nodded, but the tension was palpable. Margot's legal notice, ethics violations, misconduct, was delivered in a sealed envelope, her face paling as she read it. The second danger struck as I left the boardroom. A fire alarm blared, lights flashing red, and the archive floor locked down. Smoke curled from a vent, acrid and thick, but the sprinklers didn't kick in. I grabbed a junior associate, her eyes wide with panic, and we navigated the dim corridors, my heart pounding, as I realized this wasn't an accident. Someone wanted me trapped. Or worse. We found a service exit, the cold air hitting us like a slap as we stumbled out. The fire was contained, but the message was clear. My enemies weren't just in the boardroom. Back at my loft, the third danger waited. My door was ajar, the lock picked clean. I froze, my pulse spiking, and reached for the pepper spray in my bag. Inside, the place was untouched, except for a single photo on my coffee table, one I hadn't seen in years. Me and my grandfather, his wrench raised like a trophy, scrawled across it in red ink, "You can't hide forever." I swept the apartment, finding no one, but the violation clung to me like damp cloth. Someone had been here, close enough to touch my life. The fourth danger came via email that night as I reviewed Cascade's dashboard. A new message, no sender. "We have your server logs. Step back or they go public." My stomach dropped. Those logs could expose El Raven, unraveling years of anonymity. I spent hours reinforcing my encryption, my fingers shaking as I worked. Whoever was behind this knew too much, and I was running out of time to find them. The fifth danger hit the next day as I prepared for a nonprofit board meeting. A courier delivered a package to my loft, unmarked but heavy. Inside was a burner phone, its screen flashing with a single text, "Check your brakes." I ran to my car, heart in my throat, and found the brake line tampered with, a clean cut that would have sent me careening on the next drive. I called RA, my voice steady but urgent. "We're being hunted," I said. He didn't ask questions, just promised to dig deeper. Amid the threats, Lillian's letter haunted me. I finally opened it, sitting by the loft's window as rain streaked the glass. Her handwriting was sharp, unflinching, but the words carried a rawness I hadn't expected. "I saw what Margot did," she wrote, recounting a childhood memory. "My lemonade stand ruined by Margot's accident. I didn't protect you. I thought stability meant sacrificing one for the other." She admitted to enabling Margot and Victor, letting them control the family's wealth to keep the estate afloat. "Don't become what hurts you," she ended. No plea for forgiveness, just a warning. I found my childhood journal on a shelf, its pages filled with 10-year-old dreams of a community center where no one was left out. Tucked inside was a note. "One day, I'll build a vault for everyone." That girl hadn't known the battles ahead, but she'd known what mattered. I closed the journal, my resolve hardening. The threats, the betrayal, they couldn't break me. I was remembering who I'd always been. The nonprofit's new office in Seattle was my next step, a low-slung building of steel and glass that felt like a promise kept. I walked in for the first time, the sign bearing my foundation's name, Silver Haven, gleaming in the morning light. The board welcomed me, their faces a mix of awe and curiosity, but the moment was cut short by a call from RA. "Margot's license is suspended," he said. The blog post hit. Someone inside the bank leaked her misconduct. I exhaled, a quiet victory, but the weight of Lillian's letter lingered. A young reporter waited outside, his notebook open but his camera down. "Someone wanted your story heard," he said. No questions, just a nod. I didn't respond, but his words echoed Mr. Holloway's interview, my grandfather's friend who'd spoken of the trust built for me, the girl no one saw. The story went viral, not in tabloids, but in ethics forums, striking a nerve that unraveled Margot's career. My phone rang. Lillian's number, then the estate line, again and again. I didn't answer. Their panic wasn't my burden. I stood in the nonprofit's lobby, the journal's note in my mind, a vault for everyone. That was my legacy, not the family's wealth or their approval. I'd withdrawn my loyalty, my love, and invested it where it could grow. The final tension came that night as I sat in my loft, the city's lights blurring through the rain. A new message from RA. "They're closing in, we need to move." I didn't know who they were. Rival firms, family allies, or shadows from my alias's past. But I was ready. The silence I'd wielded wasn't just a weapon, it was my strength, earning interest with every step I took. Tomorrow, I'd face the next battle, not as the girl they'd erased, but as the woman who'd built her own vault. The rain rattled the windows, and I smiled, the storm outside mirroring the one I'd carry forward.